If an avoidant is on your mind constantly, it's easy to assume you're the only one feeling this deeply. You replay conversations, revisit moments, and dissect every silence. You wonder why someone who once felt emotionally close now feels distant and unreachable. In that quiet space, your mind begins to tell you a painful story. I care more than he does. But there's a truth most people are never told. Emotional distance does not equal emotional absence. Avoidants don't stop feeling, they stop showing. And very often, when an avoidant is living in your thoughts, something far more complicated is already happening on his side, silently and internally, without your awareness. When an avoidant goes quiet, most people assume the thinking has stopped. In reality, the opposite is usually true. He may not be calling, texting, or showing up emotionally, but his inner world is active. Avoidants don't process emotions by sharing them. They process emotions by containing them. So instead of saying, "I miss you," he thinks it. Instead of asking for reassurance, he debates with himself about why he shouldn't need it. You become a quiet presence in his internal world, surfacing unexpectedly when something reminds him of you. You appear when he feels calm and suddenly unsettled, when he's alone with his thoughts and can't distract himself fast enough. What's important to understand is that his silence isn't emptiness, it's regulation. You represent closeness, and closeness activates vulnerability. Vulnerability for him feels unsafe. So rather than moving toward you, he turns inward. He replays conversations, wonders if he revealed too much, and questions whether he allowed the connection to go too far emotionally. He may even downplay what you meant to him out loud. Not because it wasn't real, but because acknowledging it would require admitting feelings he doesn't know how to manage. This is where many people misinterpret what's happening. They believe that if he cared, he would reach out. But avoidants don't reach out when they care. They retreat. Caring creates pressure. Pressure triggers fear of expectations, responsibility, and emotional dependence. So he stays silent, hoping the feeling will fade, hoping distance will restore his sense of control. Yet the more he tries not to think about you, the more persistent your presence becomes in his mind. He might distract himself with work, routines, or even other people, but these are not replacements. They are buffers. You remain unresolved in the background. The connection didn't end emotionally just because communication paused. It simply moved underground. And while you may be questioning your worth in the silence, he is quietly grappling with something far more uncomfortable. The realization that someone mattered enough to disrupt his emotional balance. For an avoidant, emotional control isn't just a preference, it's a survival strategy. He often learned early in life that relying on emotions or people was risky, so he built his identity around being self-sufficient, composed, and unaffected. When someone begins to occupy his thoughts consistently, that inner order starts to crack. He's no longer fully in control of what he feels, and that loss of control is deeply unsettling. When you're on his mind all the time, it isn't because he's weak or confused, it's because his usual defenses aren't working. He can't simply switch off the emotions you activate. He notices himself checking his phone, replaying moments, or feeling sudden waves of longing that seem to come out of nowhere. These moments frustrate him. He doesn't like being pulled by emotion instead of choosing rationally. It feels like losing grip on the steering wheel of his own life. This loss of control creates intense internal conflict. On one side, there's a genuine pull toward you, comfort, familiarity, and a desire for connection. On the other side, there's a strong urge to reclaim emotional independence. He may tell himself that thinking about you means he's becoming dependent, or that closeness will eventually cost him his freedom. These thoughts aren't really about you, they're about preserving autonomy. Because he doesn't know how to sit with this tension, he tries to solve it in his head. He overthinks, analyzes, and rationalizes instead of feeling. He may suddenly pull back, grow distant, or act colder than before, not because his feelings vanished, but because he's trying to reassert control. Distance becomes his way of quieting the emotional noise inside him. What makes this especially confusing is that from the outside, it can look like indifference. Internally, though, he's navigating something chaotic and unfamiliar. The more you matter, the harder it becomes for him to feel steady. And until he learns that emotional closeness doesn't require losing himself, this struggle for control will continue quietly, invisibly, and often misunderstood. An avoidant can be emotionally attached long before he ever admits it, even to himself. Attachment for him doesn't show up as frequent messages or open vulnerability. It shows up as resistance. When you begin to matter, his mind immediately goes to work trying to neutralize that feeling. He questions it, minimizes it, and reframes it as temporary or inconvenient. Not because the attachment isn't real, but because accepting it would force him into emotional exposure he isn't prepared for. You'll often see this in the way he oscillates internally. One moment he feels close, grounded, even energized by the connection. The next, he feels the urge to pull away, create space, and remind himself that he doesn't need anyone. This push and pull isn't manipulation. It's self-protection. His emotional system is wired to associate closeness with loss of autonomy, disappointment, or pain. So as attachment grows, resistance grows alongside it. Instead of leaning into the bond, he intellectualizes it. He starts asking himself whether the timing is right, whether the connection is practical, or whether he's better off alone. These questions sound logical, but they're often defenses designed to keep him from feeling too deeply. Thinking feels safer than feeling. Logic becomes a shield against vulnerability. What's crucial to understand is that his resistance is not a lack of care. Often, it's the opposite. The more emotionally invested he becomes, the more he feels the need to protect himself. He may convince himself that he's not ready for a relationship or that something about the connection is wrong, even if he can't clearly explain why. This isn't intuition. It's fear dressed up as reason. From the outside, this can look like mixed signals or emotional inconsistency. Internally, it's a battle between desire and defense. He wants connection, but he's terrified of what that connection might demand. Until he learns that attachment doesn't require erasing himself, he will continue to resist what he already feels. And you remain far more significant to him than his behavior suggests. When an avoidant realizes that someone holds real emotional weight, his first instinct is often not to move closer, but to create distance. This isn't because the connection lacks value. It's because value raises the stakes. The more important you become, the more pressure he feels. Pressure translates into expectations, emotional availability, consistency, and vulnerability, all of which activate his deepest fears of being overwhelmed or losing himself. So he pulls back in subtle ways. Messages grow shorter. Initiation slows. He tells himself he needs space, time, or clarity. On the surface, it looks like detachment. Internally, it's regulation. Distance allows him to breathe again, to quiet emotions that feel too large or demanding. He isn't trying to punish or confuse you. He's trying to stabilize himself. What complicates this is that creating distance doesn't dissolve the attachment. It only pauses its expression. While he may appear calmer or more composed from afar, the connection remains unresolved inside him. He thinks about you during the silence. He wonders if you're moving on, whether he made a mistake, and whether he should reach out. But reaching out feels risky because it could reopen the emotional intensity he's trying to contain. This is where many people fall into self-doubt. They assume distance means disinterest. But for an avoidant, distance is often the price of caring without feeling consumed. He believes closeness will eventually demand more than he can give. So he steps back preemptively to avoid failing or being exposed as emotionally inadequate. There is also a quiet fear of being needed. To someone with avoidant tendencies, being needed can feel less like love and more like a trap. So, when he senses that you're emotionally invested, he may pull back to reassert his independence. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's afraid of becoming someone's emotional anchor. Until he learns that intimacy does not automatically mean obligation or a loss of freedom, distance will remain his default response to meaningful connection. And while you may experience that distance as rejection, for him it is often a conflicted attempt to hold on to the connection emotionally without losing himself in the process. When an avoidant feels emotionally impacted by someone, a subtle yet powerful shift begins inside him. He starts reframing the connection to make it feel safer. Instead of allowing the bond to exist as something meaningful, he mentally reduces it. He tells himself it wasn't that deep, that the timing was off, or that the chemistry was exaggerated. This isn't dishonesty. It's self-protection. Minimizing the connection helps him feel less exposed to its emotional weight. He may remember moments where he felt close to you and immediately counter them with reasons why it wouldn't have worked. He focuses on small flaws, imagined incompatibilities, or hypothetical future problems. These thoughts aren't about clarity or truth, they're about control. By shrinking the emotional importance of the connection in his mind, he creates psychological distance that feels safer than acknowledging how deeply it affected him. This process usually happens silently, without you ever knowing. On the outside, he may seem logical, calm, or even dismissive. On the inside, he's negotiating with himself. He's trying to convince his emotions to stand down. He might repeat narratives like, "I'm just not in the right headspace," or "this wouldn't have lasted anyway." These stories bring temporary relief because they remove the pressure to engage emotionally. But here's the paradox. Minimizing doesn't erase impact. The feelings don't vanish. They go underground. He still reacts when he hears your name. He still feels a quiet pull when something reminds him of you. The mind can downplay a connection, but the nervous system remembers it. That unresolved emotional residue often shows up later, sometimes as regret, sometimes as sudden reattachment, sometimes as an unexpected emotional wave long after the connection has ended. This is why avoidance can look detached in one moment and emotionally affected months later. Minimization works for a while, but it isn't resolution. It delays emotional processing rather than completing it. The connection stays with him not as open longing, but as something unfinished. For the person on the other side, this can feel invalidating or confusing. But understanding this pattern reveals an important truth. When an avoidant minimizes a connection, it's often because it mattered more than he knows how to hold. Even when an avoidant appears calm and unaffected, there is usually a quiet, emotional current beneath the surface. The more meaningful a connection was, the less likely he is to process it in real time. Instead, his emotions surface later, when the pressure is gone and his sense of control has returned. This delayed response isn't intentional. It's a byproduct of how his nervous system responds to closeness. He can only feel safely once the perceived threat of emotional demand has passed. During the connection itself, he's focused on managing himself, staying composed, independent, and unburdened. Feeling too much while the relationship is active feels overwhelming. But once distance is established, the emotional guard softens. That's when memories feel warmer, longing becomes clearer, and the significance of what he had can finally be acknowledged. Time gives him the illusion of safety, and with it, access to emotions he previously shut down. This is why avoidant individuals often experience regret or curiosity long after a connection ends. He may begin wondering what you're doing, whether you've moved on, or if he misunderstood what the relationship could have been. These thoughts can confuse even him. He may tell himself he's over it, yet still replay moments, revisit conversations in his mind, or feel a quiet ache he can't fully explain. This delayed emotional awareness doesn't always lead to action. Recognizing feelings doesn't mean he knows how to express them or repair what was lost. Reaching out still feels risky. It could reopen expectations, vulnerability, or emotional responsibility, all things he hasn't learned to navigate with ease. So he often remains silent, carrying the realization privately. What's important to understand is that this delayed processing doesn't lessen the reality of the connection. If anything, it confirms it. He needed distance in order to feel, but that same distance made it harder to act. And while you may have done the emotional work in real time, he is only just arriving there quietly, slowly, and often too late.